Inside, Lester woke with a start. Something felt wrong. He didn't hear footsteps in the kitchen or the sizzle of bacon in a fry pan. Where was Mama in her red apron? Where were Uncle Herbert and Papa? From his window, Lester spied Papa on the beach, waving the oar with its apron flag. And he knew something terrible was happening on the lake. He wanted to see for himself. He wanted to be with them.
I am honored to be joined by the award-winning local author Barbara Joosse, who has written over 50 children's books. She's here today to tell us about her new book. Let's get started. I'd like to give us a little short summary, Barb, about or a sneak peek into your new book, The Fisherman, the Horse, and the Sea.
Well, I love talking about this story. You know, it's one of my favorites ever. For one thing, it's true. It's a true story. And one thing I've learned, when you live next to the lake, the stories are big. They're big stories. They're less about dollars and cents, more about life and death, because the lake can be a very dangerous place. And like a lot of Ozaukee County, this is a place that is filled with families who have had the same sort of jobs forever and ever. And I'm just going to read very first page of this book because it capsulizes the new little town where I live, Port Washington. It begins like this. Lester was the son of a fisherman. He knew Lake Michigan could be soft as a kitten one day and terrible as a sea monster the next. So I have learned that one of the first things, and you'll recognize this, one of the first things people say when they introduce themselves is this. I've lived in Port Washington my whole life, and so has my mother and my grandmother before me. And you'll find that people are the son of a something. Mm-hmm. So it's the son of a banker, the son of a newspaperman. And so that's part of what I wanted to portray on that first page. And the other is the mercurial nature of the lake. And I have lived in Ozaukee County almost my whole life, many years in Cedarburg, grew up in Grafton. But when you live, you tend to look at the lake when you don't live next to it on the beautiful days. Mm-hmm. But man, True. The storms come up fast and furious. And you think, besides the towering, crashing waves, what is the water filled with?
So you're humbled, actually, by the whole experience of the largeness of the lake.
Yeah, and it is more dangerous. It's said by many people, including the harbor master, it's more dangerous than an ocean because of the nature of the currents and how fast the storms come up. Mm-hmm. And when I said that the towering waves are filled with sand, it's sand blasting. Oh my. So that means whatever is exposed to those waves, whether it's a human being, a boat, a pier, whatever it is, has tremendous force. It's breathtaking. You feel very small beside the lake. So that's why there are such big stories when you're associated with the lake. And even though in Cedarburg we're only 20 minutes from Port Washington, it feels very different because of the lake. The sky is different. The
temperature.
The temperature is different. Yep. And even the flowers. I do some volunteer planting at Rotary Park, and I need to pick plants that can take big wind.
Mm-hmm. So you actually have a lot of inspiration because you do live on the lake.
Correct. Right
in your window to look out every day to see a different mood that's happening out there.
That's right, and how fast it could come on.
Right.
And, of course, we have the family, the Smith brothers, who had the famous Smith Brothers restaurant, so that's part of the book.
I remember that. I got to eat there many times. Not many, but at least half a dozen to a dozen over the 20 years that I was up here.
I know. Yeah.
So it was nice.
Yeah.
Fish on a plank, right? Isn't that what they do in Port a lot, is fish on the plank? Mm-hmm. So, so that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that also about the people that live there. And I have found that also, too, that in towns like this around Ozaukee County, there are generations that stay here.
Yes.
And that tells you something about the place.
Correct.
That people like it. Mm-hmm. And having worked in the library here for almost 8 years, I've had many families move back to the area.
Yes.
Because especially during COVID, there was several people coming from the west side. Mm-hmm. New Mexico, California, Colorado even, that said, well, I live there. My husband's from the area. We decided to raise our children in Ozaukee County, so they're coming back. So it is a very special place.
It is, and I think it's the loyal. I mean, one of the things I wanted to do in the book, first of all, the most important thing is to tell a riveting story, a big tale that's true. It takes all the musty and dusty out of history to hear this story. Mm-hmm. But I also wanted to subtly demonstrate how life was different then. So I have a huge discussion guide available for teachers, for schools, that allows kids to look at something like questions are, what sources of energy do you see in this book? Mm-hmm. You know, the thought that you don't have a lighthouse because there was no electricity, and you don't have a lamp, and so when you hear cries outside in the dark, you can't just look and see what it is. You have to wait for the light. I wanted to demonstrate children working, not just playing.
Mm-hmm. And they did back then. They all had chores.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
There were no iPhones and technology back then.
Yep.
So that would be very interesting. We can pass that information along to the local teachers here.
Yeah, the discussion guide. It's a real good one. Oh. And because I was working with the Historical Society, Wisconsin Historical Society Press, they had, I wrote the discussion guide, but then they had their whole crew of educators go over it and add some things, take out some things. Mm-hmm. So it's really well suited for schools.
Very nice. Well, the book had some interesting topics that you'll find out when you come to the, everybody comes to the talk on Sunday in the back with a lot of little details. So that's a real nice thing to have here. So since it was a true story, Barbara, how did you happen upon this? Was it, did the story find you, or did you seek the story out, or
I didn't seek it out.
I had never heard of it. It was fascinating when I read it.
It is, isn't it? Right.
Is.
Well,
I intend to have my own copy.
My illustrator and very, very, very good friend Renee Grafe, her brother-in-law told her the story about Frank the horse. And I was charmed by a horse named Frank. So that was sort of interesting to me. And of course, the only thing that was interesting, Frank, was not the name of the horse. But it actually was the Frank horse, which in itself is interesting because we think of horses and dogs and animals as our pets. Mm-hmm. And in those days, they often didn't have a name because they were work animals. So it was known as the Frank horse. She told me about this story, and I went to the Resource Center, Port Washington Historical Society Resource Center, and dug into it and realized there wasn't enough about the horse to make a story about a horse. But I have a very, very stubborn brain that never takes no for an answer. Only a challenge.
Yes, so, it can be done, right?
Right. It's like you say, no, we'll see about that. So maybe a year later, I woke up with an idea, and I thought instead of making it about a horse, I will have 3 protagonists, 3 main characters, the fisherman, the horse, and the sea. And now that I had known Lake Michigan so intimately, it was exciting to demonstrate the lake as a character.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Yes. Great way to put it together. So how do you begin the process of that, like converting that idea then? So you had the idea and you thought, well, I'm going to make 3 protagonists out of it. How do you turn that into a picture book? Do you try to do an outline, or do you say, well, gee, this is going to require 3-4 drafts to get this all together, or that kind of thing? How do you bring that idea and those
first I assume together? Hundreds of drafts.
Yeah,
hundreds.
Okay.
I mean, I assume
No, I'm sure you do it a lot less than that.
I do not.
No? Okay.
No, I mean, and so... Well, what happened in this case, and everyone's a little bit different, but this one I had the idea, I had the title, And I had that first page. I woke up with it. So my subconscious had been working on this all year.
You had the mental outline already there. So
that beginning.
Right,
that beginning. That's all. Then I had to research at the Resource Center to find out as much as I could about the characters. Then I did a lot of internet research. I found out things like, I Googled swimming horse, and I found out that a horse can't hold its breath, and so it can't hold its breath when the waves are too high. It can drown. Well, that was a great piece of information, and you only get that by sort of fishing for not knowing what you're looking for. Just
right.
So I had and I don't let myself start until I have all of the research done. Jackie Olson at the Resource Center put me in contact with Lloyd Smith, who is the grandson of DeLoss Smith, who is Papa in the story.
Wow.
The son of
and
Lester.
Still in the area, of course.
He was, but he died in the last year before the book came out.
Okay.
But he was so helpful. He gave me access to his family's scrapbook and stories, and he went on and on about them. And I decided early on, you don't corral Lloyd Smith, you just let him talk. And he corrected everything that I had wrong. I wanted Mama to have a bigger role. He said, nope. She did what women did in those days. She cooked, she sewed.
Okay.
And
well, you wanted to show it in an accurate way.
I did. Yes.
Depict it in how it really was. Mm-hmm. Even though it's writer's privilege, but you wanted in this particular thing because it was historic. You wanted to show the correct bend of the story.
But then I was able in the back matter to show the evolution of how women's roles changed by describing the daughter and how she had done all these things. Evelyn Smith, amazing. So she turned gender roles on its ear, and that's a difference of a generation.
Right. Very thoroughly researched. So, so how does that collaboration work between the author yourself and your illustrator? Do you write a little bit and then they illustrate it? Do you go back and forth with the ideas? Tell us a little bit about how that communication works and with Renee.
It's completely different with Renee than anyone else because we are tight. We're good friends. We talk almost every day on the phone, even though she lives, for the most part, in L.A., although she's coming to the talk and signing. Yes. But we talk almost every day. And so in the beginning, I'll say, this is a big, dramatic story. And she says, oh, I see the illustrations of, now I've forgotten the name of the artist, but I said, yes, that's right. Big story, big illustration. So we start with just descriptions like that. And then when I begin to write, I'll say, okay, how many pages will this take? Because I don't want to give her so many words that it's crowded on the page. Mm-hmm. And she understands the pagination we begin with. So there's nothing I write and
like
nothing.
Your typical 37 pages for a picture book.
32.
Or 32,
32. But
32 pages,
interesting. Right. This is really interesting about children's books. When I began to write a million years ago, 35 years ago, every book was 32 pages, and there was lots of text per page. It changed about 15 years ago. There were very short sentences meant for younger kids. Over second grade, didn't look at picture books.
Right.
And they were, there was no subtlety of language. There was no development of character. Everything was kind of snappy and clever, which didn't suit my writing style very well. Mm-hmm. But now, when I look at Hornbook, which is the...
Right, I use that every month. Mm-hmm.
It's the place, right, to get reviews, right? And I look at that and I count the average pages. And now it looks like it's all 40 pages is the average, not 32 pages. There is more big storytelling.
There is, and there's also more stories that are longer again.
Yes,
I've seen that in the 25 years I've been in libraries and purchased books. We would have, I would have a section on just we would call them the older picture books,
right?
Because they were like, someone would pick them up and go, I can't sit and read this to my child, yet it is beautifully illustrated. So we would keep them in a separate section. So some of those will end up in a regular fiction section in a library versus the picture book section, or even if they're slightly like a biography, they'll go in the biography. I moved them into there because those are the people that really want to look at them in science. But there is a trend in both directions. And
there is, and I'm excited about that. It fits my style a lot better.
Yes.
But an interesting thing about books for the very, very young, that is pre-1, like little bitty kids.
Toddlers,
They will, if you write in a lyrical manner, they prefer the longer books because that is conversational and that is what they're used to hearing before they're born. When you do the quick one sentence per page books, it's a clunker to their ears. They're hardwired to learn language. It's when they begin to walk and crawl that those short books are good because then their attention span is short.
Right.
But they'll pick up the longer books afterwards.
Oh, yeah. I love doing rhyming books in story time. That's what I look for. Rhythm and rhyme and a little bit more meat in there.
Yep.
They want to know what's going to happen in the book. It's just not, like you said, it's not a one-page thing. So.
Right.
So how long does this really take? So you've been researching this. Is this a couple of years?
It's usually 3 years from start to finish. So the first year is research and writing, but coordinating with Renee a bit. Then the second year, first half of that, I'm writing and revising. And then I bring in Renee, and her 6-month period is very concentrated, whereas I will do maybe 6 projects within a year. She concentrates devotes almost all her time for 6 months on a single book.
Oh, okay.
So it's a bit different. And then the third year is largely up to the publisher.
Okay. So you've been working on this for a while.
Yep.
Now, do you see any follow-up to any stories there in Port now that you've been there? Or is there something we can look forward to? And I don't think I have. I mean, the Historical Society Press would not do another Port Washington Lake book because they want to spread it around. They want to spread it around.
Yeah.
Right.
But my next book that I'm doing with them is on Death's Door.
Oh,
so the lake, it's still the lake and the aspects of the lake, but it's
the Door County Death's
Door.
I just came back from there last week. We just got back.
Yep.
That would be interesting. So you'll have a ship, something with a sail.
Well, this one is written in the voice of the passage.
Okay.
It starts out, I am wind, I am water, I am rock so sharp they can tear a boat apart. I can't help what I am Death's Door.
I love it already.
And then follows 6 separate stories of greed and love and devotion. So all the reason people took the chance to take that passage.
Is Renee going to be the illustrator?
Absolutely.
Also? Now, do you have a hand in choosing the illustrator, or do you suggest
for Wisconsin Historical Society Press? Yes. Okay. If they have a chance to work with Renee and I, they'll take it.
Well, I love all the books you've done with Renee.
There's no argument.
Anything she's done, I'm just amazed. I mean, all of her different series that she's done, just beautiful.
They are.
Is this a good time for picture books then? You think we talked about how they're getting different sizes, different pages, really getting into the age of the child and what they need versus younger and older and read-alouds. Read-alouds are a whole different things. Would you say that picture books are still popular in the publishing industry, and are they mainly still in print? I mean, I know we have tumble books and things to read online, and we all know this from last year and COVID, how everything got online with it. But do you still see a print? I personally do as a children's librarian.
We have almost been untouched by technology. Yeah. I mean, there are recordings, yay. There are little trailers, yay. But most of the reading is done to a child. And then when a child is, that's their transition to learn to read, is by being read to, as you know. And the publishing industry has not really changed in that way. The only pieces that have changed recently are just fabulous in allowing us longer books. And, what I like to do is have text, some pages that have heavy text and an illustration, but then have some spreads with all illustration and no words, because a child falls into those pages. I worry when we get to slightly older children in their reading that they will develop the habit we have of only seeing the words. So I like to give them pages, if it's for older readers, where it's just illustration, so they turn off the reading switch for a moment and observe.
That's interesting too. The other genre that they're reading a lot of are graphic novels.
Yes.
Speaking of illustrations,
Yes.
if that's your thing.
Yes.
We used to call them comics.
Right.
And that's also got the illustration in there, and it's our collection here is probably at least tripled since I've been ordering here, with people donating
Absolutely.
money
It's
toward the
a big
graphic
hot thing.
novels. So it's a big hot thing now. So do you see yourself getting into any graphic novels at all? It would be a completely different way to illustrate, and the illustrators are different.
Not a pure graphic novel, but Death's Door will have elements of the graphic novel. So we will have panels of story without words. And then we'll have pages of illustration also. So it'll be a combination.
Oh, nice. So you'll be back on Sunday, 1 o'clock at the library, Cedarburg Public Library, at the community room, to share an immersive program about the book. Can you tell us a little bit about what we can expect from that presentation?
Well, you can hear and see pictures. Some of them are old photographs. I'll show the process of creating a book, and then I'll read the book. And I'm just wondering if I could read a few pages now. Would that be possible?
Oh, it would be totally possible. It would be totally possible.
Pick a place. Because we've talked all about...
And I'll pretend that I'm in your reader's hug.
Okay. All right, in the reader's hug. Okay, well, what's happened to this point in the story before I start is that the horse, the Frank horse, has been introduced as a workhorse for the Smith brothers, who are fishermen. And there's been a terrible, terrible storm that night. And until the light of day, they couldn't go outside. They thought they heard crying outside, calling. And so when they come out, the brothers and the wife, they see that there's a schooner that has a broken mast and torn sails, and that two fishermen or two crewmen are trying to get in the water in a little boat, and they know they can't make it because the Smith brothers are very knowledgeable. So they are not sure what to do, and they try to go out to reach the fishermen or the seamen, and they cannot. Their boat is beaten past. Okay. A small group of fishermen gathered on the beach, knowing one of their own was in trouble. But what could they do to help? Was anyone big and strong and brave enough to plow through the waves? Papa had an idea, and everyone agreed. The Frank horse. Papa was a big man, too big. He knew he would weigh down the horse, so he helped Mr. Gunther, a smaller man, onto the horse's bare, broad back. Everyone knew the Frank horse loved the sea, but a horse can't hold its breath. If a big wave washed over the horse's head, he might drown, and these waves were as big as mountains. Would the horse dare to go into the water? But, like the fishermen he served, this horse was huge in body and in heart. When he spied the shipwrecked men, he plunged into the lake. Head high, he snorted at the breakers as if they were nothing. He swam onward with his eyes on the men who needed his help. From the beach, Lester watched one of the crewmen slip into the icy water and knew he was gone. Lester reached for Mama's hand for comfort. The horse was swimming faster now, racing for the man still clinging to the boat. At last, the Frank horse was there. The shivering man reached toward him, but he didn't have the strength to climb onto the horse's slippery back.
More. We want to hear more. Are you going to have books available then Sunday also,
yes,
Barbara, for people?
And we can personalize them for people, for their
wonderful.
children and grandchildren and nieces and... Yeah.
Well, this sounds like an exciting presentation, everybody. So join myself, Barbara, and the illustrator, Renee Grafe, Sunday, this coming Sunday at 1 o'clock at Cedarburg Public Library. We look forward to seeing you. Thank you for joining us, Barbara.
Thank you, and I'll see you there.
It sounds good.
From Cedarburg Public Library Radio.